Stories Philippines podcast.
The air is heavy tonight, thick with a promise of rain that presses against the skin and the city alike, settling into the bones of buildings and people with a slow, almost deliberate weight. It is the kind of night where Manila's lights blur and flicker within a damp haze, where street lamps cast halos into the wet air, and where, if you listen closely, you might catch more than the rumble of distant thunder. Tiny, restless sounds that belong to a city holding its breath. People say the rain that falls here carries memory. Others whisper that it is stained, not only by the grime and oil of a sprawling metropolis, but by something older and angrier, a residue of grievances long held and never answered. Have you ever wondered what it means when rain turns red? Not the bright, clinical red of warning signs or traffic lights, but a deeper, sullen crimson, a slow, stubborn color that feels like a message from the earth itself, something that refuses to be ignored or sanitized. Imagine the land as something capable of feeling, of reacting, of bearing wounds in a way that is both patient and potent. What if the soil could bleed, and the water run with the hue of hurt, each drop a testament to histories buried beneath concrete and asphalt? What if the trees and rivers, long silent and patient, have grown exhausted of waiting for redress, their quiet endurance giving way to an audible, impossible sorrow? When corruption takes root and greed rends the heart from the forest, when promises are hollowed out and livelihoods are traded for profit, how do the spirits who once kept watch respond? Do they remain kindly guardians, bendable and forgiving, endlessly accommodating human folly? Or do they harden into forces far more vengeful, shaped and sharpened by a long memory of harm, ready finally to make their presence known in a language that people cannot pretend to misunderstand? I am Jessica, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. This is Season 5, Episode 3, The Blood in the Manila Rain, Environmental Corruption and the Diwata's Rage. Before we begin, a word of caution. Tonight's story weaves through shadows, through events and truths that may disturb even the bravest hearts. The darkness in this episode lingers not only in legend, but in the wounds of a land betrayed. Take care as we journey together, for some stories are as unsettling as the storm itself, and they will ask something of you: attention, empathy, and an openness to histories that do not always comfort. If you have your own encounters with the unknown or tales of the old spirits, send them our way at stories.phpodcast@gmail.ph. You'll find more ways to support and connect in the episode description. Dive deeper with exclusive content on our Patreon, and follow us on social media for a daily dose of Filipino folklore, contemporary commentary, and reflections on how these old narratives meet modern life. We read every message we receive. Your memories and your family stories help keep these voices alive. It begins not with myth, but with mud. December 2011, just a few years before this story finds you, arrived like a bruise on the island. A tropical storm barreled through Mindanao, drenching the land in unrelenting sheets. Floodwaters rose with terrible speed, swallowing whole neighborhoods in Cagayan de Oro and Iligan, and turning streets into rivers. When the waters finally receded, more than 1,000 lives were lost, and everywhere, the sickly sweet smell of rot clung to the air. In the aftermath, blame settled like silt. illegal logging and unregulated quarrying, the relentless stripping of the mountainsides, and development that had ignored the fragile balance of the ecosystems. The forests that once drank the rain and steadied the soil were gone, replaced by stumps, scars, and open wounds across the landscape. This is not just a modern tragedy. For centuries, forests in the Philippines have been more than timber and resource. They have been alive with stories, with guardians, with the presence of the Diwata. In the old days, before the sound of chainsaws and the scent of diesel, the mountains were watched over by beings both beautiful and terrible. The Diwata, nature spirits whose eyes seemed to see every trespass and whose hearts beat with the land itself, were woven into everyday life and ritual. They were not abstractions. They were woven into farming calendars, marriage rites, healing practices, and the strict rules communities observed when they entered sacred groves. The Diwata, sometimes called Anito or Lambana, depending on where your family's roots are buried, are the ancient caretakers. Their origins reach deep into pre-colonial time, threaded through oral histories and ritual practices passed down in hushed tones. The Visayans called them Diwata, while in Luzon they were often Anito. The guardians of the Tagbanwa in Palawan, the protectors of the Mandaya and Manobo in Mindanao, the fierce spirits of the Bagobo. Each group held its own names, stories, and etiquettes for approaching these presences. For every mountain, every river, every ancient tree, there was a presence. Some Diwata blessed the harvest and lent favor to fishermen. Some healed the sick and guided shamans. And some, when angered by disrespect or greed, could unleash misfortune or even destroy. Their power was relational, nourished by offerings, honored by remembrance, and provoked by exploitation. You may have heard the tales of Maria Makiling, the elusive spirit of the forested peak that bears her name in Laguna. In the stories, she is generous, leaving baskets of fruit and gold for those in need, appearing at dawn to help a lost farmer find his way or to mend a child's torn dress with threads of moonlight. But when greed overcomes gratitude, when the villagers take what is not freely given or try to claim her gifts as their own, her blessings harden into something cold and unknowable. Her gifts turn to stone, and her face vanishes into the mist, a silent lesson that abundance demanded respect. Then there is Maria Sinukuan of Mount Arayat, a guardian who fed the poor and tended to the land, yet who also laid down stern rules. Those who harvested without a heart or stole from her domain were met with swift retribution. Her wrath famously turned thieves into swine, a grotesque transformation that became folk shorthand for moral consequence. And eventually, disgusted by human greed and indifference, she withdrew, taking the bounty of the mountain with her and leaving only an echo of what had been. In Cebu, Maria Cacao rides the river in her golden boat when the floods rage, a shimmering, terrifying figure who reminds the living that nature's power is never truly tamed, and that generosity can become a force of reckoning. These are not just bedtime stories to make children sleep. They are warnings encoded in myth, cultural memory passed down through generations so that the lessons remain alive. Across the archipelago, superstitions and rituals endure in many forms. A whispered apology before plucking fruit, an offering of rice or coins at the base of a threatened tree, seasonal prayers to the spirits of the land. Never take fruit from the mountain without permission, say the elders. The fruit might belong to someone else, or to the spirit who tends it. Never cut a tree without first asking the spirits, if only as an act of humility and acknowledgement. When storms come, some elders still whisper apologies to the Diwata, hoping to stave off disaster. Others fasten small bundles of native leaves and rice on doorways, or tie threads around trees as a sign of covenant. Yet, with every new road bulldozed through the hills and every tract of forest opened for development, the old respect is eroded. With every shipment of illegal timber carted away under cover of night, the tangible proofs of those stories, the mossy groves, the springs that once gushed clear, shrink. Modernity moves with the arrogance of invulnerability, convinced that concrete and contracts can conquer memory and ecology alike. Politicians sign away ancestral forests for a cut of the profits, often ignoring the customary land rights and the voices of the people who have cared for those landscapes for centuries. Local officials look the other way as rivers become sluices of mud and silt, and the mountains bleed their soil down into the lowlands. The downstream villages suffer, their rice fields choked, their wells tainted. And so, the stories change shape and tone to match the new realities. The Diwata, once gentle and forgiving in many accounts, become enraged in others. They are transformed from kindly guardians into vindictive spirits who lash out with typhoons and landslides, as if finally avenging a long, patient grievance. Where once they offered quiet counsel and discreet aid, they now stand as ominous reminders that the balance has been disturbed, that taking without gratitude or care has consequences that go beyond household misfortune to widespread ecological collapse. A listener once shared her family's ordeal from Leyte, a place where the line between land and water is always shifting and where the seasons arrive with a mood like a living thing. Her uncle, a barangay captain respected for his steady hand and his love for the hills above their town, tried to stop illegal loggers from hacking into the slopes that fed the rivers below. He received warnings, first anonymous letters slipped under his door, then men who lingered at dusk with eyes as cold and hard as steel. The logging continued despite his protests, despite petitions to local officials, and despite the uneasy quiet that fell over the forest each night. That year, the rains came early and harder than anyone remembered. On the night the mountain gave way, the sound was not distant thunder but a terrible, rising roar, an avalanche of trees, boulders, and choking earth rushing down the valleys through the sleeping village. Her uncle's house, like so many others, was swept away in minutes. Survivors picked through mud and found only splinters and silence where whole lives had been. In the aftermath, neighbors whispered that the Diwata had turned their backs on the people, or worse, had unleashed their anger at the relentless taking of the forest. Others tell of dreams and warnings that arrive before disaster, visions that tug at membranes between the worlds. A mother in Nueva Ecija claimed to have seen a woman in white standing at the edge of her yard, her hair tangled with leaves and vines, her eyes brimming with sap-like tears. "Leave this place," the woman warned in a voice like wind through grasses. "The ground beneath you is hollow." Skeptics would later call it a hallucination born of fear. But when the landslide came with the first violent downpour, only those who had heeded the dream fled to higher ground and lived. The rest are remembered each year when the rains return, their names spoken softly so the living do not forget. If you've ever traveled through the Sierra Madre, the long green spine of Luzon, and the last great bastion of Philippine rainforest, you might sense something that is not merely the absence of city noise, but a palpable presence inhabiting the trees. The air is cooler there, the light filtered into a constant, shimmering green. Local guides still pause at certain streams or beneath certain canopies to murmur a quiet greeting or apology before stepping across. They know the stories, the old taboos, and the etiquette that city folk dismiss as superstition. Even when modern lives rush past in buses and trucks, those who live by the mountains carry the memory of those rules like talismans. But the Sierra Madre, like so many sacred and fragile landscapes, is under an unrelenting siege. Satellite images show the scars plainly now. Brown wounds where ancient trees once stood, sinuous scars of roads cutting the ridgelines, rivers choked with the yellowish silt of disturbed earth. Each new access road, each quarry blasted into the hillside is a wound cut deep into the living flesh of the land. And as the wounds multiply, so do the catastrophes. Landslides carve new scars that bury villages. Floods swell and erase entire neighborhoods. And as villagers say, the blame is shared between the greed of men who profit from timber and minerals and the sorrow or wrath of the spirits whose homes are destroyed. In Mindanao, after the catastrophic storm of 2011 that left landscapes rearranged and communities decimated, survivors described more than the physical chaos of water and mud. Some swore they glimpsed figures moving in the sheets of rain, shapes that seemed to move against the current, faces appearing for a heartbeat in the flash of lightning. One small child claimed she had heard singing, a long, wordless melody that rolled through the night as the river swallowed her home. Her mother, hardened by loss but still human with grief, could not say whether that sound had been a blessing or a curse. Some nights she thought it comforted them. Other nights, she feared it drew the storm in closer. Paranormal investigators and folklore researchers, drawn to these stories like moths to a flame, sometimes try to measure what cannot be measured. Their instruments record sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, strange pinpricks of light among the branches, and voices on the wind that transcribers struggle to match to any living tongue. Scientists and skeptics often scoff, offering explanations of trauma, suggestion, and misperception. Yet in places where every stone, stream, and pathway carries a story told and retold across generations, even the most rational minds find themselves forced to wonder whether there is more to loss than physics alone can explain. Environmental scientists, too, see the connection, though they use different language and different tools to describe it. They speak of ecosystems, of how the loss of forest cover leads to soil erosion, of how weakened root systems and compacted earth fail to absorb water, and of how denuded slopes cannot hold back the rain. They point to long-term field studies and satellite imagery showing that every hectare lost increases the risk of disaster, that incremental changes to the landscape accumulate into catastrophic shifts. But for those who live with the land, these are not just abstract numbers on a page or rows in a spreadsheet. They are lived experience, passed down in stories, measured in seasons, in the timing of floods and the yield of the next harvest. The scientific explanation and the supernatural warning are two sides of the same truth. When the balance is broken, when thresholds are crossed, suffering follows for people, plants, and animals alike. Religion offers another layer of meaning and practice that modifies how communities respond. The arrival of Spanish missionaries centuries ago did not erase the belief in Diwata and other indigenous spirits. Rather, it transformed many practices, sometimes blending older faiths with newer ones into complex, syncretic traditions. Today, prayers for safety and bounty are offered both to saints in painted chapels and to spirits at shrines beneath the trees. Some Catholic churches hold special masses before the typhoon season, blessing the fields and the fishermen, asking for protection through ritual and communal prayer. Yet, in quiet moments and out of sight of the main roads, many still leave offerings at the base of ancient trees, scatter food at the mouth of a cave said to be the dwelling place of a powerful Diwata, or whisper requests at river bends believed to be spirit paths. These acts are not mere superstition for those who practice them. They are part of an ethic of reciprocity with the land, a cultural framework that insists on respect and restraint. As we move through the city, it is easy to forget these connections, or to assume modern life has severed them entirely. Concrete and steel seem invincible, and the urban skyline promises control and mastery over nature. But every now and then, the rain reminds us of deeper ties and long memories. It falls harder, heavier, sometimes with a stain that people cannot ignore. Red as rust, as fresh earth, as a wound. In some streets, the water runs thick with clay and blood, a mixture of eroded soil and history and warning that leaves residue on sidewalks and on the stories people tell. Journalists have reported instances where the rain seemed tinged with red, especially near sites of recent deforestation or landslides, where exposed iron-rich soil is easily swept away. Scientists explain this as iron-rich particles carried down from the mountains into rivers and drains. Still, old-timers and elders often shake their heads and offer a different interpretation. It is the land, mourning, they say. It is the Diwata, weeping for what has been lost. Their words carry the weight of generational knowledge and of communities that read the landscape like a living text. It is not just the rural areas that tremble under these pressures. In Manila itself, the violence done to the land echoes in the violence that erupts in the streets and in the slow violence of poverty and illness. Environmental degradation and social harm are intertwined. Corruption at the top trickles down, infecting every level of society and eroding trust as surely as clear-cutting erodes the hills. When politicians and private interests profit from environmental destruction, when illegal logging, reckless development, or compromised regulations are allowed to proceed, it is not just the forests that suffer. It is the people, their homes swept away in floods, their health compromised by contaminated water and air, their livelihoods undermined by lost fisheries and failed crops, and their children denied a secure future. The connections between land, spirit, science, and politics make clear that protecting the environment is also protecting human dignity and community resilience. One listener story, submitted from Quezon City, tells of a childhood spent near a creek that once flowed clean and deep. He remembers swimming there, catching small fish, the water cool even in the heat of summer. Over the years, he watched as factories rose along the banks, dumping waste with impunity. The creek turned black, the fish vanished, and the neighborhood children stopped playing by the water. He dreams sometimes of a figure standing in the polluted shallows, her hair floating on the surface, her eyes fixed on the factories. One day, she whispers, "I will take it all back." If you have stories like these, of loss, of warning, of the land speaking, share them with us. Your voice matters. Email us at stories2phpodcast@gmail.com. Let us remember together and let us warn together. The rage of the Diwata is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is slow. A creeping sickness that kills the trees, a drought that withers the crops, a silence that settles over once bustling fields. But sometimes the anger is swift and unmistakable, like the night a landslide buried an entire village in Benguet, or when a flood swept through northern Samar, carrying away everything in its path. In each case, survivors speak of omens, a sudden cold wind, a dream of a woman in green, animals fleeing the woods days before the disaster. The warnings come in many forms, subtle and overt. There are families in southern Luzon who still refuse to cut down certain trees, even when developers offer them money. They say the trees are home, but do not say for whom. One grandmother confided to her grandson that the acacia at the center of their lot is older than anyone remembers. Once, a neighbor tried to dig out its roots for firewood. That night, he fell ill with a fever no doctor could cure. In his delirium, he babbled about a woman of light standing over his bed, whispering that he had trespassed. He recovered, but never again set foot near the tree. In the towns that border the forests of Palawan, children are told not to play near the rivers at dusk. The Diwata are said to walk there, their feet never touching the mud, their eyes watching for disrespect. One evening, a group of boys dared each other to swim across the widest part of the river. Only 2 returned. The missing child's mother claims she saw a woman in the water, her hair trailing like vines, her face hidden by a veil of fog. The next morning, along the banks, they found small footprints in the sand, too small for any adult, too delicate to be human. These stories, layered on top of one another, build a kind of living memory, a warning passed down through generations even as the world insists on forgetting. The Diwata, once figures of beauty and mercy, have grown restless. The violence done to their domains changes them, or perhaps reveals a side long hidden. Communities feel the shift in small ways. Wells that once brimmed now yield only brackish water. Fruit trees bloom but fail to bear. Songs once sung at harvest grow thin with each season. Elders exchange knowing looks when new roads are planned through ancient groves, and mothers clutch their children tighter when trucks rumble past sacred stones. Still, not all encounters end in calamity. There are accounts of quiet bargains struck at dusk, offerings left on tree stumps, rice placed at riverbanks to ease passage, prayers murmured at threshold stones. A fisherman in Iloilo told of a night he drifted too close to a mangrove and felt a soft hand shelter his net from a jagged root. He dreams of her still and wakes grateful when his catch is enough to feed his family. A barangay captain in Mindoro spoke of a season when rains were scarce until the townspeople performed a simple rite to honor a fallen seba. The monsoon returned as if on cue. These acts of remembrance, small and large, attest to a fragile contract between people and place, a recognition that respect can avert ruin, that care can restore what neglect has damaged. Yet the contract is fraying. The pressures of development, short-term profit, and a fading oral culture risk severing the threads that bound communities to the land. When those threads snap, the stories grow sharper, the images more urgent, and the warnings louder. We collect these tales not to exoticize fear, but to listen for patterns, the way certain omens cluster before disaster, the places repeatedly named where harm follows heedless extraction, the behaviors that seem to placate or provoke. They are ethnographies of grief and survival, and advice encoded as myth. If enough of us attend to them, if we record, respect, and act, perhaps the Diwata's whispers will change from threats into guidance. How to steward watersheds, where to leave corridors of forest, how to honor the living memory held in trees and stones. So tell us your stories. Tell us about the wells that used to sing, the mothers who dreamt of rain, the men who cut and never slept again. Mail us the memories you carry, the warnings your grandparents passed down, the small rituals that have kept gardens alive. Email us at stories-phpodcast@gmail.com. Your memories are evidence. Your recollections are counsel. Together, remembering and sharing, we might yet persuade those who build and those who govern to listen. Together, perhaps, we can help reclaim what has been taken and protect what remains. A submission from a listener in Bicol tells of her family's desperate escape during Typhoon Reming in 2006, and the memory remains vivid and raw, even years later. The storm brought landslides so sudden and fierce that entire barangays were swallowed in minutes, and the sound of the collapse echoed in people's minds for a long time afterward. She remembers the wind shrieking like a living thing, an almost human sound that seemed to tear at roofs and uproot trees, and the rain so heavy it felt like drowning. Each sheet of water a new attempt to erase the world she knew. In the days after the catastrophe, when survivors wandered through mud and ruin, people said they saw a woman, her dress torn and muddy, moving slowly but deliberately and searching the ruins for her children. Some said she was a spirit of the mountain, a grieving presence who could not accept the loss of those she watched over. Others believed she was the Diwata herself, a powerful guardian whose grief became a mirror for the parents who had lost everything and could not find closure. That pattern of belief and explanation repeats across the country in different forms. Greed leads to destruction. Destruction leads to suffering. And suffering is explained not only by the failures of human systems, but by the perceived betrayal or wrath of unseen guardians. In Zambales, near the quarries that have slowly eaten away at the foothills and altered the face of the land, an old man keeps a small shrine in his garden. He lights candles for the Diwata each evening and leaves plates of rice and fruit beneath a balete tree, a quiet ritual of respect and supplication. His son, who works as a miner, scoffs at the ritual and the old stories, until the day a cave-in traps him deep underground. He survives, barely breathing and bruised by the collapse, and when he is finally pulled from the darkness, he tells his rescuers that he heard a woman singing in the blackness, her voice guiding him back toward the light and the narrow exit. The story spreads among neighbors, and the son's newfound humility softens the son's earlier ridicule into a steady, if reluctant, reverence. The international parallels are striking and help place these local beliefs in a broader human context. In Ireland, there are tales of the Aoife, fairy folk whose wrath is feared when their sacred mounds and places are disturbed by careless human hands. In the dense forests of Japan, the Kodama are spirits of the trees, and felling one without offering proper respect is said to bring misfortune and strange, unexplained occurrences. Across continents and cultures, indigenous peoples and traditional communities recognize the land as alive, inhabited by beings who demand reverence, reciprocity, and restraint. The difference between societies is not in the presence of these beliefs, but in how they are honored or ignored, whether through ritual offerings and community rules, or through the relentless push of modern development. Modernity, with its machines, markets, and short-term incentives, often treats the land as inert, a convenient resource to be managed, traded, or exploited for profit. But in the Philippines, the older stories persist in everyday conversation, not simply as quaint folklore to be archived, but as living explanations for the inexplicable and as moral frameworks that guide behavior. When tragedy strikes, many people do not limit their blame to the failure of policy, planning, or individual negligence. They also point to the anger of the Diwata, an idea that the land itself can rise up in protest when it is mistreated, and that spiritual imbalance can have real-world consequences. In 2004, after a devastating landslide in Infanta Quezon that killed hundreds and left entire communities bereft, survivors reported seeing strange lights moving across the hills the night before the disaster. Some rational explanations were offered: headlights from rescue vehicles, distant fires, or atmospheric phenomena. Others, however, insisted these were the Diwata, gathering in sorrow or warning to witness the consequence of unchecked greed and the stripping of the slopes. A local priest, interviewed by a journalist in the wake of the tragedy, cautioned that faith alone cannot protect a community that has lost its respect for the earth and the rules that once governed human-land relationships. Pray, yes, he said, but also listen to the warnings that come before the storm, urging both spiritual attentiveness and practical measures, better land use planning, stronger enforcement of environmental laws, and genuine community engagement to prevent future disasters. The science behind these disasters is clear and well documented. Remove the trees, and the soil loses its anchor. The delicate network of roots that once held the earth in place is gone, and the structure of the hillside is weakened. Rainfall that would once have been absorbed into leaf litter and porous soil instead becomes a sudden, destructive torrent, carrying away topsoil, homes, and livelihoods in its path. Rivers once lined with bamboo, hardwoods, and dense riparian vegetation become clogged with sediment and debris, their channels altered, their flow rates unpredictable and deadly. But for those who live in the shadow of the mountains, the story is never just a matter of neat cause and effect. The land is wounded, and wounds have a way of festering and influencing every aspect of daily life. Corruption, too, is a wound that spreads quietly and insidiously. It is the silent force that allows chainsaws to keep running after dark, the trucks to leave loaded with logs at dawn, and waterways to flow dark with silt and pollution. It is the bribe slipped into an official's hand, the permit signed in secret, the false ledger that obscures who benefits. It is the promise of development that never brings broader prosperity, only localized enrichment for a few and ruin for many. In the stories told by survivors and elders, there is often a villain, but it is rarely a monster with fangs or claws. More often, it is a man in a suit, a handshake made behind closed doors, a decision that places short-term profit above the safety and well-being of entire communities. Yet, even in the depths of disaster and the shadow of institutional failure, there are acts of resistance and resilience. In Aurora, for example, a group of local youth organized community patrols to guard reforested hills near their town. Armed with little more than flashlights, bicycles, and a fierce determination not to lose the remaining forest, they chased away illegal loggers, tracked and reported suspicious trucks, and partnered with elders and municipal volunteers to plant thousands of saplings. They spoke not only of environmental protection in technical terms, but of honoring the Diwata, of restoring the balance their grandparents remembered, and teaching younger generations why that balance matters. Their efforts were not always successful. Sometimes the logging resumed after a lull, and sometimes the young trees they planted were uprooted or killed before they could take root. Yet their resolve inspired others to join, to march at public hearings, and to document abuses. One young woman, interviewed for a documentary about their work, said, "We have to believe the Diwata are with us. If we forget them, who will protect what is left?" Her words captured both a cultural conviction and a practical, mobilizing belief that sustained community action. Another listener's submission recounts a barangay in Rizal that gathered every year to clean the river and plant seedlings along its banks in a ritual of care. The ritual began with prayers, both Catholic and indigenous, and offerings of rice, eggs, and salt to honor the spirits and the shared environment. Children learned the old songs, the names of the spirits said to dwell in the water, and practical skills like seedling care and erosion control. When a flash flood threatened the village during one particularly intense rainy season, the damage there was noticeably less than in neighboring towns. The elders credited the Diwata and the community's offerings, suggesting their gratitude had been rewarded. Scientists and relief experts might describe the outcome as the result of good watershed management, effective riparian planting, soil stabilization, and community preparedness. But for the villagers, the explanation was holistic, blending spiritual practice, memory, and practical stewardship into a single narrative of protection. There are moments when the supernatural and the scientific appear to converge. In the chaotic aftermath of a disaster, forensic teams methodically sift through the rubble, cataloging and counting the dead with clinical precision. At the same time, survivors gather at improvised altars, lighting candles and arranging offerings for those lost, and for those still unaccounted for. These rituals are not merely acts of comfort. They are urgent pleas for forgiveness, humble acknowledgments that something essential has been violated. The rage of the Diwata, as recounted in these stories, is never raw, single-minded vengeance. It is sorrow made visible, a grief so profound that it becomes indistinguishable from fury. In a nation where loss is an ever-present companion, and every rainy season brings renewed peril, these older beliefs provide both explanation and admonition. The land remembers our trespasses, and we in turn must remember what has been done. If these tales move you, or if you have endured storms, landslides, or other calamities and have felt the quiet presence of something watching, please reach out. Share your experiences and reflections at storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. By telling these stories together, we can keep the memories and lessons alive and ensure they are passed on. The Manila rain falls hardest on those who have forgotten the past. The city, often deaf to the voices of memory and tradition, is haunted in ways it cannot easily name. In the flooded thoroughfares, in neighborhoods built on fragile, reclaimed land, in gardens where crops fail to take root, the signs of imbalance reveal themselves to those who know how to look. There are, however, whispers of redemption and renewal. In pockets across the archipelago, efforts at reforestation and watershed restoration have brought back birdsong and clear-running streams. Communities that once lived in constant dread of disaster now find glimmers of hope in the return of green growth and recovered ecosystems. The Diwata, it is said, may forgive if respect replaces greed, if gratitude displaces arrogance. As this episode draws to a close, let us pause in the fragile quiet after the storm and consider what these stories ask of us. What should we make of tales of rage and sorrow, warning and possibility? Are the Diwatas simply metaphors for natural forces beyond our comprehension? Or are they as real as the rain that drenches our rooftops and the blood that moves through our veins? Perhaps the definitive answer matters less than the lesson itself. The land is not ours to exploit without consequence. It is a gift, a responsibility, a living archive of memory. When we neglect or violate it, the effects ripple outward, felt not only by us in the present but by generations yet to come. Tonight, as the rain patters softly on the window pane and the world outside settles into a hush, remember the stories you have heard through the years. Recall the names of the rivers and mountains that have shaped our lives, the warnings whispered by the elders around fires and under starry skies, and the dreams that often come like omens before disaster. Let those tales and recollections be your guides, not only in moments of sudden crisis, but in the quiet choices you make every day. How you treat the land, how you honor your neighbors, and how you carry memory forward for those who will come after. If you would like to support our collective efforts to keep these stories alive and passing them on to younger generations, please check the episode description for several meaningful ways to connect and contribute. There you will find links, contact information, and opportunities to become involved. Exclusive episodes, extended interviews, behind-the-scenes conversations, and special materials await patrons on our Patreon page. And each new follow on social media helps us spread the word about the wonders, lessons, and warnings embedded in Filipino folklore. Imagine for a moment, waking to a world that has been altered beyond recognition. The familiar landscape transformed, roads swallowed by new rivers, and the rain itself carrying the scent of memory and stain of regret. In such a moment, what would you do? Would you reach for the old stories your grandparents told you, searching them for guidance, maps, and meaning? Would you strain to hear the voices of the Diwata in the rumble of thunder and the sighing of the wind, trusting that the spirits of place still speak to those who listen? Or would you turn away, comforted by the belief that such things are only legend and no longer relevant to the practical decisions of the present? As the writer Jose Rizal once observed, "He who does not know how to look back at where he came from will never get to his destination." In that spirit, the path forward is found in remembrance and in respect. Respect for the land, respect for the stories that hold a people together, and respect for the lessons that have been accumulated across generations. It also requires the courage to learn from the past, recognizing mistakes, acknowledging grief, and applying hard-won wisdom to the building of a more mindful future. If this episode moved you, please listen to more installments of Stories Philippines podcast, where we follow journeys into the shadows of history and the beating heart of our culture. Each episode seeks to illuminate the intersections of myth, memory, and everyday life, uncovering the voices that too often go unheard. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with friends, family, and anyone who cherishes stories. Support us however you can. The show notes contain full details on donations, patron tiers, exclusive perks, and ways to volunteer or collaborate. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight, and for keeping these narratives alive through your attention. May the rain that falls on your roof bring only renewal and reflection, not regret. Rest well. Carry the stories with care. And until our next tale, good night.